Hello, my name is Holly Amato, and I have Brent Bowyer, co-owner and partner at ADAM, American Divorce Association for Men, with me today on the Onward and Upward show. Brent's been an attorney for about 29 years and held ownership in ADAM since 2009. Thank you so much for joining me today, Brent.
Hey, you bet. Thanks for having me. Great to be here.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So before we get started, though, I wanted to point out that although your business focuses on divorce, you've actually been married for 28 years, raised two daughters successfully as well. That's quite an accomplishment, of course, in
Yeah,
this day and
thanks. Yeah,
age. Yeah. So do you have any words of wisdom for people now so they don't have to call you later?
yeah, definitely. I think a lot of it is just staying in tune with each other. It's that many years. It's hard not to grow and be different. I mean, you want to grow and be different. You're trying to grow and be different together, and it doesn't mean that you have to do it. Like I downhill ski. My wife doesn't ski, but we still go and we do stuff together, and she's there with me. And I think that's a lot of it. Is just you need to stay interested in each other and create reasons to be interested and make space and time for each other in a marriage, whether there's kids or not, especially if there's kids. You got to make room for have a date night, go on vacation for a week without the kids, and you do those sorts of things. And then you're doing everything you can do. Like for us, religion is part of it. I think religion can be a big thing with marriages and divorces. And not that everybody that's religious stays married or everybody that isn't gets divorced, but there's certainly a theme of that is also a bond and sort of a thing to do together. And you just need those interests and finding new ways to create things to do together as you evolve. And of course, I'm not the same person I was 30 years ago. I didn't even know who I was or what I wanted back then, but you can choose to work together and do all those things. And then you're doing everything you can. It's not always going to work out. Some people grow apart.
Right, right. Well, that's wise, very wise of you. Sage advice. And, I just think that's great. I think it's great that you support marriage, of course. And, a lot of times people don't just come to you, oh, I just thought I'm going to get divorced. So here we go. Let's just do it. It's usually like, for what I looked into, it's about 3 years that people think about it sometimes and maybe come back
Yeah.
and forth and maybe sit down with you and then maybe say, I don't know what I'm going to do here. So,
Yeah, it seems
yeah.
valid. I feel like a lot of it, by the time they're seeing me, it's kind of too late for me
Right,
really be trying to help save their marriage. Not that I really could anyways.
right.
It's pretty late in the game that they're actually meeting with a divorce lawyer.
I
So
agree.
you just say, okay, well, we know the hard part is probably over for them. They've made the decision
Mhm.
and you move from there. If there's any talk of trying to reconcile, I certainly encourage it, give them advice about it best I can. I'm not a therapist, but you start feeling like one after all these years of listening to people. You learn from them. Really, I learn a lot from the clients every day. I learn from people. They have interesting ways of saying things and putting things and perspectives, and it's great. You really can learn so much from people that you would never read in a book or just get from something else. It's good.
Absolutely. Yes, I agree with everything you just said. We do have a lot in common. We're both working with people who are divorcing. You're obviously working, on that front line with men going through the process as an attorney. What made you decide to become a co-owner of Adam, working specifically with men?
Yeah. So I mean, first of all, we do take women on referral, but we've always been kind of driven as geared towards representing men and men's side. And I think what got me going on that is working alongside the lawyers that started this place, that this isn't like, the He-Man Woman Haters Club. This is like these guys that are so defeated and they get so beat down. They're in an abusive relationship a lot of the times and they're being taken advantage of. They don't know any better. And when you throw in the element of lawyers that supposedly know what they're doing and then really don't, and they've gotten bad advice, and it just that whole world led to like, somebody needs people that are just focused on this, lawyers that specialize in one type of law and really even one side of the divorce case, not just all divorces. And that really kind of hit home with me that made sense that these guys, you think men have all these rights and there's all these great things for them, but there's another side to that where they can feel very cut out, removed, left out, especially if there's children. And that always just kind of hit home with me. And it's easier to relate to your own gender, I think, in a lot of ways. You can certainly see that perspective, but it became a lot more than that here. Half the attorneys are women, and there's certainly a whole thing of just looking at the men's perspective, but also they just want to be treated fairly. They just want to, that's what it was about. And that really kind of hit home with me.
Well, I love that you mentioned those things because I think, when you said, your own gender, right? I think a lot of women, because I've worked with both, and I've been through a divorce and I have the female perspective on that. But the world kind of has this vision that men are the ones maybe taking advantage. They're like the stronger, quote, stronger gender. And it's really interesting. I'm glad we're going to talk about the male perspective because I think when we can actually take a moment and see things from another side, men are just naturally not as great communicators as women. Not all men, but I find that women communicate a lot. We have our tribe of people we go to. I don't know that men really sit around drinking a beer and say, hey, man, I want to talk about what's going on in my marriage, right? And it's nice. It'd be nice if there could be a space opened up. I know that a lot of churches will do that, men's groups and whatnot, but it would be nice to have a space for that. And I would like to hear more about the challenges that you feel that you're seeing that men seem to face that maybe we don't really know about or haven't really given much consideration to.
Yeah, for sure. I think a lot of it feels like a permission sort of thing. There's very much a discussion when you meet with someone that's getting divorced and it's a man and they're saying, well, can I do this and am I allowed to do that? And it's very, you can tell they've been very pushed into sort of a specific type of role and very specific things that they feel like they have to ask for everything.
Mm.
And it's not that all women are like, oh, everything, I'm entitled to all this and I get custody. And well, not all women are like that, but there's a lot of these relationships because we're meeting with broken relationships, right? I mean, these are pathology. These are not well functioning relationships at this point because they're meeting with me and I'm doing divorces. And those broken relationships have turned into where a lot of these men just feel like they need permission for everything, and that it's very unequal when they're trying to negotiate things because they don't feel entitled to their fair share. They don't feel like they're entitled to time with their kids, or they're so angry about all of it, they can't really articulate what makes sense. And, they want everything because they're just upset. And it's hard to kind of sort that out. We just, our perspective is we want to tell you what you're entitled to, what's reasonable, what's fair, and then you can do what you want. But we don't want someone taken advantage of and they never knew they had the rights to all these things in the first place. There's a lot of very beaten down people, men or women. By the time they've had to make that decision to get divorced, they've probably tolerated too much abuse, nonsense, neglect, and it's hard to walk out of that. You're so used to that world where, like, if it's a male client, their wife is running everything, and they don't know how to really even let that go. And they'll say, "Well, my wife says this, or my wife says that, or she thinks this," and you just got to kind of say to them, "We don't care what she thinks. We want what's reasonable." If what she wants is reasonable, that's great. Or if it's whether it's a man or a woman, there can be a lot of that sort of damaged abuse kind of talk of they say this and they'll do that. And I'm afraid they're going to say this. And you just say, we got to look at what makes sense and let's do what's reasonable. You're both going to be good if it's reasonable.
Exactly. And as you're talking, I'm thinking about, the word bully comes to
Yeah.
mind.
Yeah.
That's a real big word. It's been used a lot lately. I think sometimes it's overused personally, but I think that probably a lot of men don't want to be seen as a bully because they understand, I'm, the stronger of the two typically,
Yeah. Right.
not all relationships, maybe most relationships, and so there's, in my thought process as you're talking, potentially they don't want to be seen as a bully. And their concern is maybe while they're asking you so many questions is they're worried about what they're going to look like through the process. How do I go through this process and not look like the bully, not look like the bad guy, not look like I'm not being fair? What am I allowed to do? Because it does put you in a position where they are going to need some strong leadership there for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. Yeah. You're right. Yeah. The bullying, or they don't realize they're being bullied and they start describing how all this is. And they really can't hear it themselves that this is a very abusive, might not be physical abuse, but it's a very abusive relationship that
Sure.
they're enabling it. They're allowing it. The more that they stay in this with this person who has their own, whatever their problems are, whether there's addictions or, whatever it is, untreated things, they are used to that. They want peace. I think people just want peace in their daily life. So they'll do too much to keep the peace, and they're trapped into all kinds of crazy stuff, regardless of gender. I mean, people, you get into whether you know you're doing it or not, or whether you feel like you're free to leave, it can be very daunting. Change is hard. It's very hard for people. Even if you know you have to get divorced, or even if your spouse has filed a divorce, it feels very overwhelming. It feels like everything is going to change. And it's a lot to be trying to figure out. But you can do it. It's just kind of one step at a time. You got to get the right advice. Got to look at it the right way.
Absolutely. And when somebody calls, let's say for an intake or a consultation, whatever that looks like with you, I'd love to hear about that. Also, do you, at this stage in your career, are you in a place where you're able to sit down with someone, hear what's going on, make some recommendations, and really determine this is someone that we can work with? Or maybe once in a while, there's someone that you feel like, I don't know, but this is going to be a great fit for me, even with this personality. Yeah, I'd love
Right.
to hear what that
Oh,
looks
yeah.
like.
Yeah, for sure. We meet with them, typically we start out, there's initial phone calls and that sort of thing. But once you're beyond that, you schedule a 1 hour meeting with myself or my partner. We do most of those. And yeah, we want to, they're interviewing us, but we're also interviewing them. Like you said, we want to make sure that they're a good fit. It's important in that meeting to set some expectations.
Mhm.
You get people that like custody is a good example. You'll get someone that comes in and they just don't know, and they're in a bad relationship. They're not getting along. They say, well, I want custody. And I want to, almost like they're saying, like, I want to win custody. Like we're going to be on TV and a judge is going to bang the gavel and say, you get your kids or something.
Right.
And we try to reframe it as, you're really going to need to work this out with your spouse. If it's kids, you're going to have to work this out with the mother. There's a mother and a father for these kids. No one else really cares what happens, to be honest. And you can't do that now. I know you're not in a place now to work that out, but 5 months from now, we're going to be working this out. So it's not a time to try to make it worse or be fighting with them or picking fights or causing trouble. You're just trying to keep the peace with the perspective that this person is someone you're going to have to settle and work things out with. And they're still going to be in your life if you have kids.
Exactly. I'm glad you brought up kids in custody, because I think there's probably two things in my mind that are the two top issues, right? Money is one of them, but the kids, if you've got young kids, that is huge. And I know in the past, it seemed like men had more of an uphill battle trying to get equal custody of kids. Or like you said, there are situations where maybe the mother just is not fit. She's got, like you said, there could be substance abuse, there could be mental health issues that are not being addressed. There are some real things. And it used to be, I don't know how many years ago, maybe you'll talk about that evolution, but where it was an uphill climb, I think, for men to be considered, an equal, if you will, parent that could really split that parenting time as well as the mom could.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And it's, over the 25 plus years I've been doing 25, I think of because, 25 years ago, they created a separate court system for divorce and family law. Used to be when I first got out of law school, you would go do a divorce case and that judge was doing a personal injury case and a contract dispute. And these divorces were just something getting in the way of what they thought was important. And it was really good for men and women going through divorce that we created a separate court system. Now you have a judge that really only does divorces, maybe some adoptions. They do family law exclusively, which means they get better at it. They know more about it. They're more empathy, more understanding, and it's just a way better thing instead of running it like it's a civil case or a personal injury case or some deadlines and commitments and no emotion. Because divorce is all emotion, so really that helped that evolution that the court system, at least in Michigan, got created. And it went hand in hand with, you can't really expect shared custody if you're not involved in your kids' lives. And it kind of became, I think, in society, from what we've seen, where men were more involved. There was more and more women that were working full time. So now both people are working full time. And it became a more shared responsibility. And then it's easier to say, I want time with my kids because you've been doing all this stuff. You know the dentist's name, the teacher's names, who where karate class is. You can't come in and have never been involved in the kids' lives and just start talking about how you want half the time with them. That's going to be a disaster, right? So that all, I think, has evolved in a lot of good ways, that men have had more of a role in the kids' lives. And the court system is now just a family law court system. And that's all kind of helped it go in the right direction, because really it's all about agreements. I mean, 98% of these are going to get settled out of court. So you got to work it out at some point. at the beginning, the emotions are high. It's difficult. I get that. But at some point, you're going to want an agreement. You don't want a judge telling you what to do. Nobody likes when a judge tells you what to do.
Right. Well, and I think the understatement of the year is when you said
Yeah.
divorce is full of emotion
Yeah.
because it's a roller coaster. Experiencing it myself, my
Yeah.
parents were divorced, so I've seen divorce close up, and I work with a lot of people going through it in real estate, and they really do need somebody to come along and guide that process because
Yeah.
it is a lot. And I do know the judge's perspective is, you mentioned that too. They used to just think, you're wasting our time. They look at it like, if you could have got yourself together, you wouldn't have to be on my docket today.
Right.
And I do know that their biggest concern is the children. Their biggest
Yeah.
concern is what's best for these kids. You guys are adults. You didn't learn how to play nicely in the sandbox. So now
Right.
somebody has to come in and help you with this. And I'm going to say something, be a little devil's advocate here, just because I know that this is a perspective that women have. And we might have some women listening, and I hope that we do. I really hope that we do. Because the female perspective, when they're so concerned about the kids, sometimes they don't want to share the kids as much, right? They don't want to let them go. And in their mind, you mentioned, the dad that maybe one spouse doesn't know as much. They don't know the teacher's names, or they don't know the doctor's names. They don't know what their kids are even allergic to with food, right? There's some situations
Right.
like that.
Yeah.
So they look at it like, well, why do you all of a sudden, or maybe that was the big argument, try to get you involved more, and you wouldn't. Now all of a sudden you want to have custody. So the perspective from the other side could be, is it because, what's the first thing I said important? Money.
Yeah.
We
The
all
money. Yeah.
know
Outsport. Yeah.
that child support is going to be based on those nights and days and time with the kids.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
thoughts on that?
Yeah. Yeah. It's true. And you want to make sure that that's not driving the discussion. And that's why I say, like, in the very first meeting I ever have with a potential client is talking about this and setting expectations. And we're not going to, first of all, there's no law that says you get half the time with your kids. So that's sort of like a win. That would be the best case scenario, that you end up with half the time. That's really the most you're going to get, right? Unless you've got something really unusual going on. So you say, well, that's the maximum amount of time, but what's reality here? What are your work hours, and how involved are you with the kids now? And you have to kind of lead it to, you're not going to say, I want half the time just to get no child support or some low child support number. And but I think too, the money is an issue. The emotions is in it. The emotion is overwhelming. I mean, I can meet someone for the first time. They're going to make me cry in the first meeting. I mean, some of this stuff is really heartbreaking, and you just have to help them. You have to be a lawyer, but they don't need too much lawyer in that first meeting. They need someone who just can kind of hear them out, because they don't have anyone else to talk to. Usually they're afraid, they're ashamed. They don't want people knowing about it. They're very isolated and alone, whether it's men or women. And I think too, what you touched on with kids that is important is, it makes sense that if your relationship's broken, the kids are kind of all you have. So then it is very hard to give up that time with them and talk about shared custody, because you've been functioning where they're like the only good thing in your day, because you're in this relationship that's no good. And that makes it all the harder to have a real discussion about it. But we try to just guide it from the beginning. Say, you're going to get somewhere between every other weekend and half the time, and it's going to land somewhere in there. And it's not a trophy to be won. What ends up with custody, you got to work it out. Even if the other person has problems, they need help. They don't need to be thrown out with the trash. If they need mental health things going on or substance abuse, the courts look at it that way too. They don't just throw people away. They want people to get better and to be a functioning parent. They know the kids need both parents.
Exactly. Yeah, there's so much that goes into that. And I think you mentioned feeling like a counselor sometimes. I do as well. And you're right. When people are going through this process, they need someone that'll listen. And it can be very, very overwhelming on the other end of that line. And you have to be prepared for that. If you're going to work with somebody going through divorce, right? And you know this better than anybody, it takes a certain mindset. And with regard to the kids, and still kind of in that realm, with what I deal with is people that'll come to me that are in the process or thinking about it, and they're looking to make a move. Okay, great. So what are you allowed to do? Because I remember I think it's still in play, is it like the 100-mile rule
100-mile rule. Yeah. Yeah.
from the
Yeah.
marital home, correct?
Yeah. It's from where they are at the time.
Right. And, keeping things like schools, like I know the court holds that in high esteem. They want to keep they can stay in the same school, keep their life as normal as they possibly can. Do you see a lot of issues with people who, because I've had situations where, because it's a divorce, because someone is feeling so broken, they want to go towards where family is. So family might be outside of that realm. I can imagine that becomes a bigger conversation. Now you're getting in and you're really having to do your lawyering, as you say. You got to really get in there and either defend the person who doesn't want them to go, or you're advocating for the person who's saying, listen, I have this great situation somewhere else. I know that can be a huge, like a time bomb with a lot of people.
It can, yeah. And and you would think, just sort of in the abstract, people should be able to move, right? I mean, it shouldn't be like impossible. You're not allowed to ever leave Sterling Heights just because you're in Sterling. It's kind of unrealistic to just say we're never leaving this city just because we're getting divorced and losing some of control over those decisions.
Mm-hmm.
But you also don't want the other parent doing it out of spite, or they're going to move 40 miles away, which, I mean, 40 miles is a long ways in the Metro Detroit. I mean, that could be over an hour drive easily, right? I mean, it depends on the traffic. So it's definitely challenging. It certainly is. There's a group of people that they're getting divorced. They need their family, and their family might be in another state.
Mm-hmm.
And then what do? I mean, you got to try to encourage them to work that out.
Right.
You're going to have to encourage the parent left behind to see that maybe this is best for the kids. Maybe they're not that involved in their lives anyways, and this makes sense. Or if this is just something where there's no agreeing on it, you got to try to help them figure it out. Those are tough things. When someone wants to move away, really out of state or more than 100 miles, that's a big change in their life. I mean, like you said, you've been through divorce. My parents got divorced when I was a kid. I've never been divorced, but they got divorced, and yeah, we moved away. I mean, we were in Chicago, and then we moved to Jackson, to Michigan, and that's a long drive. You barely could do it in a weekend, and it changes the dynamic of how my dad can be involved. It just did. It changes everything. But it wasn't really the wrong thing to do, I don't think. It just kind of depends on the family and the people and what's exactly going on. But yeah, those are tough. The move away things are tough. I think, the beginning stages, you just want to keep everything where it is because there's enough going on without people moving and making changes. You want to try to keep status quo as best you can, but at some point, those kind of things have to be figured out. If you have to, you have a court decide it, but they don't want to decide that stuff.
Right.
They
That's
don't know.
tough.
Yeah, they hate those cases.
I'll bet. Well, the positive, if something was really needed to be worked on, somebody needed to move away, or a job, right? Maybe it's not just,
Yeah.
maybe they can
Yeah.
prove, hey, I haven't worked. I've been a stay-at-home parent. And now all of a sudden, this is the opportunity, the only one I can get. And I need to provide for my child, especially if I'm going to be the one kicking in for child support, either spouse, right? But we still have that system in most states. I don't think it's changed too much, but where we have the summers, right? So I've heard of a lot of people having, like, I'm with you one parent all summer, maybe for a couple of weeks during the breaks that we have. So there's always a way to work it out. Like you said, bring
Yeah.
people together. I'm assuming too, the relationships that you have with other attorneys, kind of similar with me. I have a lot of relationships with other realtors. We want to have those. It's important so that we can work things out between clients who do get emotional, right? So I would assume that having great relationships with other attorneys and kind of knowing everybody, it's not like you may be combative in the courtroom, but you probably go out afterward and say, hey, let's get a coffee or something, because you are having to work together for the same end. You want to resolve the case. You want to move forward.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. Absolutely. It's a good point. I think potential clients get confused about, they don't want to hear that you're like on good terms with their spouse's attorney, but that really can go a long way. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you got to work things out. You need each other sometimes. Sometimes it's the two lawyers against the court in a weird way. You got to sometimes deal with that. And it really can be a benefit to know those people. That makes our job easier because we know anybody that does divorce work, we know who they are. We have a relationship with them. They respect us. They trust us. There's plenty of lawyers that are doing divorces that don't really do a lot of divorce work. I can't do anything about that. But the ones that we know, we go to seminars with them. We go to meetings with them. The midwinter seminar that I do, we go, we were just in Costa Rica together with a bunch of divorce lawyers. And, it's great. You can get along with anybody if you're sitting on the beach, so it's a good thing. I don't think it's to be feared that you know the other lawyer, that's a good thing almost every time. But it really helps. It's another reason to hire somebody that does this type of work as opposed to just they do sort of a little bit of everything.
Absolutely. Relationships are important, and
Yeah.
having professional relationships, because you can come to terms probably quicker and better when you're looking for the win-win for everybody. Because everybody has to feel like they're winning. I feel like when you're
Yeah.
negotiating pretty much anything, you want
Right.
to make it feel like everybody's winning in some way. So
Yeah.
when you've got
Absolutely.
two attorneys that can come together and sit down while everyone's in their separate room and they kind of come together. It's great, I think. And I'm sure you have referral partners for, maybe if someone isn't a good fit, or maybe it's a female and you're like, I think you'd be really suited with someone in our office, but we mainly support men here. It's not that we can't support you as well. You might want to, look into, this office or this person, or, different scenarios. I know I have attorney friends and they constantly they're like, oh no, we refer to each other all the time.
Yeah.
You know?
Oh, it's great. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Whether it's, there's all kinds of reasons. There's other divorce lawyers that we send people to, refer them to. It's a better fit. Some of it's cost. If they just can't afford really anybody, we have lawyers that can try to even work with that a little bit. And
Mm,
yeah, and then that's great. I mean, you got to know, if you don't know what to do, you got to know the person that does, right? I mean, that's part of
exactly.
any profession. Like with us, we don't do personal injury, but we have really good relationships with lawyers that do, or whatever it is, estate planning, name it, right? You got to have your people, because it makes you feel better, makes the client feel better. You want to know you sent them to somebody that's going to handle it and do a good job. And that comes with 20 plus years of doing something, is you just know all the people that you need to be worried about and can help you.
Right. And it makes you look great too when you can send someone
Yeah.
to the best situation. I would say you'll get more referrals that way, because they could say, he could have took my business, but he saw that maybe another situation might fit better. That really goes a long way, especially to someone going through divorce, right? So
Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah. And so on your website, I was looking through everything and something caught my eye. There was an article and it said something to the effect of how divorce affects men's eligibility with Social Security benefits. I think
Right.
so we're now getting into the money part of it, right?
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Social Security, I think, is a big point of contention, especially for people who have been married a
Yeah.
lengthy amount of time. I'd love to get the insights on what that article was really focused in
Oh,
on.
yeah, for sure. Yeah, Social Security is a big one. The older you get, the more you're thinking about it, of course. And yeah, it basically, it also comes from this sort of what sounds like a myth sometimes, where people think if I've been married more than 10 years, then this happens, or then this happens. And really, the only 10 years with marriages and divorces is military retirement kind of stuff, which is a whole other category, and Social Security. So the deal with Social Security is that if I'm married and I really haven't been working, or I'm doing cash jobs, I'm not paying into Social Security, and I've been married more than 10 years and I get divorced, I can now draw on Social Security credits that my spouse paid in from their work, and I can get my own Social Security benefit, even though I wasn't entitled to one, or maybe I was entitled to a really small one. So it can become important if you're kind of an under earner because you were busy raising the kids or whatever was going on in your life, and your spouse always had a full-time job. You get to attach to their credits when it comes time for Social Security retirement, and you can get a benefit equal to half of whatever theirs is. So now you have options. If you've paid in, you can look at what your benefit would pay, and then you can look at what half of the amount of their benefit is, and you get the higher of the two. So if I'm looking at retirement, Social Security, and my ex-spouse was going to get $3,000 a month, I can now qualify for $1,500 a month, and maybe my benefit was only going to be $1,000. So I can get more money, and it doesn't come out of what they get. They get their $3,000 a month. I get my $1,500 a month, and it gives you kind of a safety net if you've been stay-at-home mom or stay-at-home spouse or just under earner, cash jobs, a lot of those kind of things that don't add up to a very good Social Security retirement number. So it can be very important when it's coming time to retire, because that comes up quick, right? I mean, depending on when you're born, you could be 62 and maybe start drawing Social Security. And if you've been married 20, 25 years, you're not far, that doesn't seem that far out. And you want to know what's the plan. You don't want to feel like you got nothing to go on, and it's been pulled out from under you, you know?
Sure. So I'm going to give you a little case study, maybe we
Yeah.
can talk
Yeah.
about.
Sure.
So I have my real estate divorce certification. I'm a specialist in divorce with real estate. And part of that certification, we had all kind of things thrown at us. And what if this, and what if this, and this scenario, and this scenario. One of them was, people don't always get divorced just one time.
Right.
I don't
Right.
know how they go through it more than once. Honestly, I went through it once. I never would want to even consider going through it again.
Right.
But it was basically talking about how this woman who had her first husband's, like exactly what you said, she had half of that, gets married to the second husband in enough time, and also is able to. How many times can someone do that? Or do they then have to drop the first husbands if they're going to take the second husbands? How does that? Because I remember that scenario, and I was sitting here trying to say, how did that go?
Right. Right. So with Social Security, you can only draw one benefit. So you're going to get hopefully the highest number that of all these options, whether it's husband number one or husband number two or whatever's going on, but you can only get one benefit.
Okay.
Now you could be in a situation where you're a couple times divorced and have two different like pensions coming in. That certainly happens. I know pensions are becoming less and less of a thing these days, but they still exist. And that definitely can be a thing. Whatever you were awarded in your divorce, even if it's been 2 or 3 divorces, that's all valid. But yeah, Social Security is just going to be, you get one benefit and you look at what you can qualify for, and that's it. And obviously pick the highest number based on what's available to you.
Okay. So then you couldn't get your own either, for example, that
No,
scenario?
no,
So you can't
no,
get
you would
yours
just pick
and
the high.
his. You have to
Right,
choose one. Now, would you
right.
be able to know what that is, or do you just have it written up?
Yeah.
Whoever is greater is how does that work?
You can tell a lot just from the web. The Social Security website is actually
Okay.
pretty, pretty detailed information. It talks about it in pretty plain English. I find it's pretty useful
Okay.
that you can look it up and get a sense of it, and you'll know, here's what my benefit would have been. Here's ex-spouse, what that looked like, and I can pick the higher number. But yeah, you only get one. So
Okay. So one more, going a little bit deeper, and then
yeah,
I'll stop.
yeah. No, it's a
One more
big time.
deeper. So let's say I'm not doing this again, so we're not going to use me. But let's say a woman decides, okay, his is better than mine, but she's young enough, right? And she
Yeah,
decides, all of a sudden, great opportunity. She's killing it, and it ends up where hers would have been better. Can she reverse that and say, I'm sure he wouldn't have a problem with it, right? No, yeah,
yeah, oh
take
yeah,
it back. You can reverse it. And she could say, no, I'll go with mine. Thanks.
right, yeah. Because what you do in your divorce isn't dictating how Social Security benefits work. It really, when you get divorced and you read your divorce judgment, Social Security is not even mentioned in there.
Oh, right.
These are just laws and rules that are just sort of going on, and you're not really, what you're choosing to do in your divorce isn't affecting it. You have the same rights. So you might, at the time you get divorced, you might think, yeah, I haven't really worked a lot. He or she was making way more money than me, so I'm probably going to apply for their benefit at retirement. But then you spend another 20 years working, and your benefit is now higher than what theirs would have been, half of, because it's half of theirs. It's not what they get. So
Right.
you just pick the highest number, but you have options at least, which is good. You have what you put in and you have what they put in, and you can choose. The hard part is you only get 50% of what their benefit is. So theirs is going to have to be pretty high to be better than yours if you're talking about half. But it's there. It's available. Some people just don't really pay in much their whole life, and it's good to have as a fallback.
Yeah. And also for women who might be listening, you might, if you're
Yeah.
getting married later in life, you might want to ask that question if someone's divorced. What did that divorce decree look like?
Yeah,
As you're putting together, your new life together, you might want to know, okay,
absolutely.
this is where
Whatever.
we're at, and not
Yeah.
something to not be forthcoming on, right? Like we've all been through.
Yeah.
It's like people don't want to have those conversations about money, but you kind of have to.
Yeah.
It's important. I say, if you want to have this relationship go better than the last one, right? Let's go in
Yeah.
there
Yeah.
being honest, and yeah. So
You want to know what you're getting into, and are they
right,
paying alimony, or is half their pension going to someone else, or whatever it might be. You want to know what they've already obligated themselves to. Not that it affects whether you want to be with them, but you want to know what we're dealing with. I just met with a couple a few weeks ago, and they're long retired, and he had been divorced a long time ago, and his ex-wife got part of his pension, and then now she's deceased. And so he's kind of thinking logically, oh, well, good. Well, that part of the pension will come back to me. But then come to find out she took a buyout 15 years ago, and that's long gone. And so he's only going to get his 75% of his pension. and he's not going to get that other 25% because it doesn't come back to him because they paid her off already. And
Okay.
they kind of logically were thinking he might get his whole pension now because she's gone, she's deceased. And you just want to know those kind of things when you're dealing with it. Because you start reading somebody's judgment and you start reading court orders on retirement accounts, and they're very confusing. There's lots of
Sure.
legalese and jargon. And you just talk to somebody. We have people that do divorce financial planning during a divorce, after a divorce, long after. They actually met with our person that we refer people to. That could explain it really even better than I could. Of here's what's going on, here's what she had a right to, here's what happened, and these people, because their question was, is my benefits department telling me the right answer, or are they
Mhm.
just trying to cheat me? Because who knows, right? You don't know. I mean, just because they tell you it's some number, it might be different,
Right.
and it's yeah, you're right. I mean, you really want to know what's going on because people
Never thought of
don't
that.
take care of, or if you're going to retire and you never took care of paperwork that needed to be done, and they're telling you we're not going to pay you anything until you deal with this thing from 20 years ago in your divorce, that's frustrating too. You want to know about
Wow.
us.
Yeah, those are the conversations that a good attorney is going to have, hopefully, with their client, when you're
Yeah.
saying, this is how this is going to go. I did not realize that somebody, because I didn't get any of that in my divorce. That was a different situation, but I didn't know that someone could say, well, I get X amount. I want it now. I didn't know they could
Yeah. Yeah.
do that.
Depending on the type of retirement accounts, more and more now, because they're all becoming defined contribution plans, like 1Ks and IRAs are really way more prevalent now. But yeah, depending on the type of retirement account, that you could take a buyout, because really you get divorced and you're given part of that retirement account in the divorce. You really are now sort of set up in that system like you worked there. Is really kind of how it works. They have this part of it, and they have your name and your social, and it's you look like you were an employee there for a little while. So then you have those same rights that if they're doing buyouts for people, you have a right to do that too. And you need to know what your rights are and how it all works, and make sure it's done correctly and the paperwork's right. It's just a whole bunch of craziness sometimes.
I feel like this could be a topic we could talk about for a really long time. Just this. I have like 100 things going through my head, but of course I
Yeah,
won't belabor the point. But again, if you're in that situation, make sure the person you're working with, if you're not working with Brent and his amazing team, you got to make sure that you are talking these attorneys. Sometimes people, and you mentioned affordability, and I know that you make things affordable for people. However, you do deserve to be paid for your expertise. This is your expertise. People don't
yeah,
understand that, oh, I'm going to find the person that's the cheapest. Well, you don't know what you don't know, especially with this. It could really burn you later. You're not saving anything if you don't work with the right who you work with matters. I say it all the time.
yeah, yeah. It's very important. Yeah, you gotta know the person that you're gonna hire. You gotta trust them. You gotta feel like this makes sense. Interview them a little bit. Ask them
Right.
how long they've been doing it. If it's a divorce, how much divorce work do they do? Is it just for their friends and family now and then, or is this their whole commitment as a career? Because it's okay either way, but you want to know that going in, to what you're hiring and what
Exactly.
you're getting.
At least get a good list of questions. And I don't know if you have that somewhere, questions you
Yeah.
could ask your attorney. Do you have that somewhere?
Oh yeah, yeah, we do. Yeah, I've got
Okay.
YouTube videos on that. It's a good topic. Just like, here's what I would go in and ask a lawyer if it was me. Here's what I'd want to know about them and about how this works. And don't do a 1 hour meeting with a divorce lawyer and not get these questions answered. There's like just specific things you'd want to know.
I love that. So yeah, we're going to have that linked under the episode, all of your
Oh yeah, that'd be great.
socials, and that way people can go to your YouTube and check that out. Because I do think, I do some of that too, like things that you should ask a real estate agent, things you need to know before you're choosing a lender. All of those are really important when you're partnering up with somebody for a very expensive financial transaction. You want to
Yeah,
make sure you choose the right person and you make
yeah,
that
for sure.
decision. Yeah. Well, really
Yeah,
quickly too,
get that.
before we sign out, I would like to know if there's either maybe like the biggest misconception in what you do, or maybe something you
Mhm.
feel that people need to know. Like if you had just one thing, one message you would want people to know, what do you think that would be?
Yeah, to me, it's a steep learning curve with understanding really what we do. People don't hire lawyers hardly ever in their life. I think there's a reasonable amount of fear around that because you don't know anything about it, first of all. You don't really trust it. It seems expensive. It seems maybe unnecessary. Like I started out in engineering And I can relate to the engineering guys that they feel like if they learn enough about something, they'll do it themselves and they think they can do everything. And that's a healthy amount of self-esteem, but you can't do everything. And you're not going to talk to me for an hour and now know how to do a divorce case any more than I'm going to talk to them for an hour and know how to be an engineer at GM, right? It's silly. And they know that, but there's a healthy amount of, I'm just going to figure it out, do it myself. And really what you want is you want to know everything about it, but you're still going to want to hire somebody to be dealing with this. And that's hard to get across to people initially of what exactly we do. It's not just paperwork. Paperwork is 5% of the process. Probably a lot like, like just like real estate sales and mortgages. Paperwork is part of the process, but it's not the whole thing. And divorces are like that too. And it's hard sometimes to get people to understand what it is I even do. And you have to, sometimes they just walk away and they really don't know what they're missing. And you have to let them. And we try to educate them, but that 1 hour meeting runs out real quick sometimes when you just don't know anything about it. That was part of why I wanted to do the YouTube channel and all the videos and the help and the TikTok and all this. I would love a client to know everything I know about this.
Sure.
It doesn't make me think they're then going to not hire a lawyer to do it. I think it makes them a better client. The more they know, they understand it. We want you to know what we're doing and why we're doing it. We don't just tell people what to do and say, don't bother me. Don't ask me to explain. So I think that's the toughest part is the misconceptions about what lawyers actually do. Do I just need them for paperwork? Do I just need them for a hearing?
Mhm.
And it's hard to understand there's really this whole process. And it's not just a luxury to have someone do it for you. You really are never going to get this done on your own. It's hard. We see so many people that they're a year and a half into a divorce case, especially in certain counties around here, and they're nowhere. The case is nowhere. They have nothing to show for all this time, either because they have a lawyer that didn't know what they were doing or they didn't have a lawyer at all. And you hate to be telling them, like, you're really kind of starting from the beginning right now. If you're building a house, you've got nothing built and you've had a year and a half, and
No
that's
foundation.
frustrating. There's nothing. Yeah. You got to empty the yard, and that's hard to swallow for people. But we get it. I mean, some people just do it yourselfers. We don't try to talk them out of it. They're going to go ahead, but we're always here. They need us at the beginning, during, whatever. We try to understand that some people just are going to go try to do it on their own, but that's a tough one.
Well, don't you think too, there's a stigma attached to attorneys and to real estate agents too? I think we're both in an industry where we have to really work harder to prove our worth, to show that we care and our expertise, because you're paying for our expertise. You mentioned paperwork. I can have someone do all of the paperwork for me. My
Right.
time isn't the best served using the paperwork. Either is yours doing paperwork. Anyone can do the paperwork, but it's the negotiating, it's the expertise that you have. It's all of the things that go into it. And it also goes back to you don't know what you don't know. Like you don't know how it could have turned out had you had that professional for you, working for you. You think maybe you saved that retainer and all those legal fees, but did you really win? And sometimes we've got to get out of that scarcity mentality and realize there's a reason why we do hire and pay for expertise. I certainly want the best if I have to go in for surgery. I don't want somebody who's cheaper and maybe didn't get all straight A's and went to Harvard. No, give me the one, who knows what he's
Yeah. A
doing.
specialist. Yeah.
This is
Oh, yes.
important, right?
Yeah.
These are important issues. And I think the more we work, maybe in the spaces like this, to have these conversations, we can pull people in to understand that we actually want to see what's best for you. We love
Yeah.
what we do. We want to help. We want to see you get what you need to move forward. We would like to see you put your life back together and make it your goal, live your best life.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Some of them I try to leave them with the idea that they just say, like, look, you don't have to hire me, but this isn't going to get done without a divorce lawyer.
Right.
So I don't know. And I can't put that into enough of an explanation sometimes for people, because there's some people we meet with, like, yeah, they could fumble through and do it themselves. They don't have kids. They don't own anything. And that's not most people, and, yeah, it's tough. And like you said, with realtors too, like I know we bought our house 3 years ago. And I think the moment where I felt like I loved my realtor was we were going to look at a house and there wasn't a lot of choices. And, I found this other place kind of last minute. I said, hey, do you think we could get in and look? And he didn't even ask for it. He said, yeah, we'll get in there. And he didn't put me through well, let me check. And all the behind the scenes that he was going to have to go do. and make a last minute thing for me to show up like 2 hours from now and see this house. He just said, yeah, we'll do it.
Sometimes you
And
do
he's
it with
just like,
5 minutes notice if you can.
yeah, right. And you just say, that's a professional that he just told me yes and was going to go figure it out. And that's huge to people, that they know you're just handling it. And you say, hey, can you do this? Say, yeah, I'll do it. And they don't want to hear a half hour of how are you going to do it.
Right.
Sometimes they just want to know. And that amazed me that he's like, yeah, okay, no problem. We'll go.
Hey, you want to take things off of people's plate. You're doing the same
Right.
thing with your clients. Like
Yeah.
you're not going to tell them all the things that have to happen for you to do what needs to get done. You're going to
Right.
ask them the questions you need the answers to. You're going to get the information from them. You're going to educate them on what they need to know. And then everything you don't need them to be bogged down with, they won't know. They'll never
Right.
actually know just how awesome you are. I feel the same way because you're shielding them from a lot of that. You're pulling that off. I had a quick story. I had somebody say to me, oh, last real estate agent I worked with, I didn't really think they earned their money because it was just so easy. Everything was just so easy. And I said,
Yeah. Right.
then she did a great job for you. I promise.
Yeah.
If you
Yeah.
felt like it was easy and smooth and you got what you wanted, she's a
Yeah.
rock star. She just didn't
Yeah.
let you know all the things, or he's a rock star that they were going through. That's actually amazing. And they were like, whoa, I didn't really think of it that way. Yes, because people only remember when things are tough. But sometimes
Yeah.
they come
Right.
up.
Right.
We have to solve them. So we're problem solvers.
No, absolutely. I mean, I when I first got out of law school, I was helping do one of the things as a lawyer you could do is help with for sale by owner houses, because without a realtor, there's like a whole piece missing. Not that I could totally fulfill, but I could help them do the closing, whatever.
Right.
And I would see some of those transactions and the nonsense those people dealt with without having a lawyer or without having a realtor, the things they put up with, the time they wasted, the money they lost, all because they wanted to do it by owner and not have a realtor it was devastating to see what some of these people had been through, thinking, oh, it should be a quick sale, no problem, and deal with it. It's like, well, it's a good analogy. It's like doing a divorce without a lawyer. They don't know what they've missed and what was wrong and how bad this is. And it was hard to see people think that they didn't understand what a realtor did. And then they didn't understand all the things they were missing. And it was, boy, doing it the hard way was not good.
Yeah, we don't want you to do it the hard way, guys.
No, it doesn't work. It just doesn't work.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for joining me today,
Yeah, you
Brent.
bet.
Oh
Yeah,
my
it's
goodness.
great.
You shared some really great information. I'm hoping we really provided that insight into the male perspective on divorce. And it's going to be a great resource to men who find themselves in that process. And I think to women who maybe need to hear the other side of things, because we all need a little bit of that, right? It helps.
Yeah, absolutely.
More
Yeah.
understanding. So I am sure that our listeners are going to want to know more about getting in touch. So please let everyone know how they can reach you.
Oh, sure. Yeah. So website is adamdivorcelaw.com. Office phone number is the best way to get initial contact, which is 248-357-4888. And, we're here. We're in Southfield, Sterling Heights. We do all of Metro Detroit. We're around.
Great. So I was going to say you have 2 locations, Southfield and Sterling Heights.
We do.
Okay.
Yeah. And a lot of it's just remote anyways. I mean,
Right.
really the 8 attorneys, there's maybe 2 of them in the office on a given day. So they go wherever, we handle the whole Metro Detroit area.
Okay, good. Well, thank you again. It's been such a
Yeah,
pleasure
thanks.
having this conversation.
It's been great. Thanks.
And we want to thank everybody else out there who joined us today. Please make sure to subscribe to the channel, like our episode, and of course, tap that bell for notifications so that you will be first to know when new episodes of the Onward and Upward podcast are posted. And everybody be blessed until next time.